Hey everybody, what's up? Ehren here. What a day we're having here. On Saturday night, a deer got struck by a car and has been injured in my yard ever since. I called Habitat for Humanity. I called all those people. They sent the police. They came on Sunday to check it out. They didn't think there was anything they could do. But now she's still out there. So I started nursing her a little bit because she's in a bad way. It looks like her back legs are really struggling. Anyhow, you can check out, I used to make videos about deer. You can check them out. They're in my archive. They're really good. These deer were so tame this summer. You'd lick your hand, they'd approach you. It's pretty crazy. Anyhow, we'll jump into the show. Hey everybody, what's up? Ehren here, Question Period Canada. It's getting cold and just in time, it's heating up on Parliament Hill. The Conservatives and the Tories are going at it, and it would seem that the issue this week is home heating costs and the carbon tax. And Trudeau and POILIVRE really do go at it today. They bring it. So we'll jump right in and kick this off. Let's get going.
Order. Adults.
Starting out with Greg Fergus.
Colleagues, once again,
this is a terrible way to start off, but here we go. This is an issue.
I will encourage you to please reread my statement that I made from the chair almost 2 weeks ago now in regarding trying to bring more decorum to this House. It's really important, not only for ourselves, but for all Canadians to understand that we understand that each member of Parliament who comes here with the best of intention to serving her or his country, to do so with honour and to do so with integrity. There are statements which we can make.
Yeah, he's full of it, all this stuff, all the time. It's worth hanging out though, guys. This is an interesting episode.
We do not cross over that line into calling into question the dignity and honour of all members.
Now that we're going, it's question period. It's going to be hot today,
Honourable
guys.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah, it's going to be.
The Prime Minister's flip-flop with regards to carbon tax causes issues with Canadians because there are now two categories, those that are temporarily exempted and those who will have to pay the second carbon tax as applicable to Quebec. It will continue to increase the price of gas, diesel and food for Quebecers.
Minister of Rural Affairs said that Prairie Canadians are going to have to continue to pay the carbon tax because they didn't vote Liberal. Will he denounce her divisive comments or admit that he's hitting Canadians with higher taxes as punishment for not voting for him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, there are people throughout the country who are facing very high prices because they heat their houses with oil. They don't always have the choice to switch to better options like heat pumps. This decision focuses on switching to heat pumps, which is good throughout the country. We're here to work with all provinces who want to make sure that low-income households receive heat pumps for free so that they may finally put an end to their dependency on oil, which is more polluting, more expensive, and that doesn't help families at the end of the day. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Flip-flop on the carbon tax for oil heating proved everything he said for 8 years about the tax is wrong. It's not worth the cost. He said that the tax would make people better off. He's now admitted that that's not true. He said it's about the environment, but he leaves the tax on lower emitting and more environmentally friendly natural gas, and now he's dividing Canadians based on where they live. So will he stop creating two classes of Canadians? Will he take the tax off all so Canadians can keep the heat on?
I haven't really had a chance to turn my heat on. I turned it on once the other day to take
our
the
fight against climate
here.
change and the price on pollution was to put more money in people's pockets and encourage protecting the planet. And that's exactly what we've seen over the past number of years. As a step, one of the things we are targeting right now is home heating oil, which is used right across the country, primarily by lower income residences, and they pay more for home heating oil than you do for natural gas. and it's dirtier and more emitting than natural gas.
Right.
So we are going to provide free heat pumps for low-income families in provinces that are willing to participate with us and drive down emissions.
Here, here.
Think there's any freebies out there? Think we're going to get any free heat pumps?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Admits that he's keeping the tax on cleaner and lower emitting natural gas. This is clearly not about environmental science, it's about political science. And that political science with him is always divide and conquer. Tear the country apart to serve his own narrow personal interest. Does he not realize that what he is doing is not just bankrupting Canadian households, 14% of whom are living with unsafe temperatures because of higher energy costs, but he's actually tearing our national unity apart.
It does kind of feel like that. It kind of does.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we see from the Conservatives yet again is misinformation. The price on pollution applied to natural gas does put more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians across the country. That is what the Leader of the Opposition refuses to recognize. When Canadians receive a climate action incentive check that more than compensates for 8 out of 10 households across the country than what they spend on carbon price with natural gas. It doesn't apply that way. That math doesn't apply on home heating, which is why we're phasing out home heating oil by replacing them with free heat pumps for low-income Canadians.
I would like a free heat pump. That would be nice, a little mini split.
The Leader of the Opposition.
That he continues to contradict the parliamentary budget officer who said that 60% of Canadians pay more in his carbon tax than they get back in the rebates. What now he's doing is contradicting what he said on Thursday, wherein he admitted that Canadians are made worse off on a net basis by his tax. That's why he's having to put a pause until after the election. Already, 14% of Canadians are living with unsafe temperatures in their homes. 1 in 10 have missed a heating bill in the last 12 months. Will he, before people go cold and hungry, axe the tax so that people can keep the heat on?
Home heating oil is more expensive, more emitting, more polluting, and is in households that on general are lower income and don't have the means to support it. That's why we're putting forward a program that is going to give free heat pumps installed right across the country as long as the provinces step up and partner with us the way 3 provinces already
See what he's doing there?
We know the best way to support families is to have them save thousands of dollars a year on heating. That's what they're going to be able to do with a heat pump. That's why we're delivering it right across the country as provinces step up.
So he's saying that they'll do it, but it's up to the provinces. Do you see how he's passing that off?
Before I pass on to the honourable
Greg,
members in the opposition,
sit
I'd
in
like
the
to thank
chair.
the whips for signalling to their members
He just
to try
won't
to
stop.
keep the noise down. I'd ask all members to please take a look at their whips and to make sure follow their example. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he admits that natural gas is cleaner and lower emitting, and that's exactly why he's going to penalize Canadians for using it. Mr. Speaker, he says he wants to bring in a pause for some people in some places. I want to get rid of the tax for all people in all places and forever. But wait, why don't we let Canadians decide? Why doesn't the Prime Minister pause the tax across the country until Canadians go to the polls so we can have a carbon tax election and Canadians can choose his plan to quadruple the tax or my plan to axe the tax?
Axe the tax. Let's get some legs for axing that tax. See what Greg's doing? Do you see what Greg's doing? He's look. See? This guy, look at him. He's getting weirder day by day. He drank all of the Kool-Aid, guys. All of it. Look at him playing with his button. That's all he likes to do is play with his
The right
button.
honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is amazing to me that after 3 failed elections in a row by the Conservatives, they still want to fight another election on denying climate change, on denying the costs of
good one.
climate change. After the
We just
summer
beat you in
had,
3 elections, he said.
They continue to say no plan
Look at
against
him go.
climate change is what's good for
Good
Canadians,
for you,
good
Trudeau.
for our economy, good for businesses.
Look at him.
They are wrong, and Canadians are going to show them that one.
Look at him bringing the fire, guys. He got wound up that time. We'll give him some fireworks. Justin usually doesn't bring it like that. Not like that. Oh, look at Greg. Coming down on the Liberals now. What the?
Again, I'd like to thank the whips for encouraging members to please to be able to exercise some amount of self-control, especially when we're listening to somebody providing an answer. The Right Honourable Prime Minister still has 15 seconds on the clock. I'll let him continue.
Mr. Speaker, in homes across the country that heat with natural gas, the carbon price delivers more, the carbon rebate delivers more than the carbon price costs in 8 out of 10 homes across the country. That is why and how we are fighting climate change and putting more money back in people's pockets. With home heating oil that is dirty, more expensive, we're phasing it out and replacing it with free heat pumps if the provinces sign up.
I realize that heating oil is dirty, like for the environment, but I don't believe that 8 out of 10 homes are benefiting from the carbon tax. Do you think that 8 out of 10 homes are benefiting?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister for the Environment
Elise
published
Francois.
certain guidelines, but made no new announcements for immigration targets. He will announce them tomorrow, but he's almost admitted that he did not know what they were going to be. So does he know today the numbers that he will announce tomorrow? That's worrying. This isn't a last-minute university essay. He needs to consult before he decides to choose a date upon which he will make his announcements. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that immigration is a strength for Canada, for its economy and for its diversity and for our communities from coast to coast to coast. We shall continue to welcome people from throughout the world, and we'll continue to do so and always do so in a responsible way, taking into account the needs of our businesses and our families and our communities, but also the needs of the world. We'll continue to do so in a responsible way, and I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow's announcement.
Wonder what the announcement's going to be.
Chambly. I'm afraid that I don't know more than that. We're debating a motion on successful immigration that would ask the immigration minister to consult Quebec, provinces and territories, which is a healthy approach for everything, in order to establish targets for 2024. Could we harbour hope that were the House to adopt the motion, the minister will not announce a target tomorrow, because he can't reach targets before he consults provinces and territories? This would be a gesture of goodwill. It would be a responsible thing to do, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we completely agree that we need to consult provinces, we have to work with municipalities, we need to consult various groups of Canadians to have good targets, and that is exactly what we have done for the past years. We work hand in hand with provinces, we work hand in hand with organizations, we work hand in hand with municipalities to set good targets for our country, and we'll continue to do so. This is a very reasonable proposal, and we will support the Bloc's motion today.
Yeah, we got to get Pierre back up there.
The member for Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister's own cabinet minister already admitted this Liberal government only wants to help people that vote for them. We already have a climate denier Conservative leader who pretends to help people. Now we've got an out-of-touch Prime Minister who only acts when it's in his own interest. New Democrats have proposed taking the GST off of all home heating, a measure that would help all Canadians. When will the Prime Minister stop dividing the country and put in place a measure that gives relief to all Canadians?
Jagmeet has a hand in dividing the country if Trudeau does, right?
Mr. Speaker,
He's part of the coalition.
A number of years ago, we made the decision to phase out coal because it was dirty and inefficient in how it powered our country. We're now making the decision to phase out home heating oil because it is more expensive, because it is more polluting, and because it is disproportionately relied upon by lower-income Canadians who need extra support. That's why we have created a program that 3 provinces have already bought in on and agreed to replace and give free home
He's having trouble.
heat pumps to low
Used all his words
across
earlier.
the country. We look forward to having more provinces sign up and deliver heat pumps to Canadians who need it.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Prime Minister is delivering a program that divides the country. L'annonce sur le chauffage domestique.
The announcement on home heating is cynic and divisive. We have a disconnected Prime Minister who just wants to help regions where they are losing popularity. And we also have a Conservative leader who denies the existence of climate change. The NDP has asked for a very long time that the GST be removed for home heating to help all Canadians. Will the Prime Minister finally do this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows full well that there are Canadians who use home oil heating throughout the country, and our programme that will be applicable from coast to coast to coast will be here to help them to make a change towards a more efficient, a less expensive, and a better for the environment heat pump. We are here to work with provinces. We are here to deliver heat pumps for free for Canadians, low-income Canadians. We will be here to fight against climate change. We'll be here to help families in order to build a better future for all.
They're building a future that's better for us all. It doesn't feel like it.
He's desperate.
Andrew Scheer taking a step.
So he announced a gimmicky plan to give a temporary pause to just some families in mostly Liberal-held ridings. Now, the senior Liberal minister for Newfoundland is proud that this exemption only applies in her region. She even called out Liberals from other parts of the country for not protecting their communities. The Minister for Prairie Development is a Liberal member of Parliament from Manitoba. It gets cold in Manitoba. So why was he so useless in protecting Canadian families in his area?
So useless. There's always a jab with Scheer, right? He's always taking a poke. Look at Greg Fergus up there. He'll play with his button.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we discussed
Jonathan Wilkinson.
yesterday, the focus of this program is enabling affordability, getting people off of heating oil, which is more than double on average the cost of natural gas in this country. It is about reducing carbon emissions at the same time. It is an important step forward for climate. It is an important step forward in terms of addressing a key affordability issue, and certainly it is good public policy.
Is it good public policy, though? Is it? I don't know.
The carbon
I don't
tax
think.
is a complete failure. It drives costs up, hasn't allowed the government to hit their own emissions targets, and now the Bank of Canada confirms that the carbon tax alone is responsible for 16% of the extra inflation plaguing Canadians. And now with this announcement, families who heat their homes with clean Canadian natural gas will be punished just for living in areas where the Prime Minister is massively unpopular. He once said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. So will he stop his divisive tactics and take the carbon tax off of home heating for all Canadians?
Take it off for all Canadians. Get rid of it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said before, the focus going forward is ensuring affordability and addressing climate change. The honourable member is entitled to his opinions, but he's not entitled to make up his own facts. At the end of the day, 80% of people in this country get more money back in a rebate than they actually pay in terms of the carbon price. This is a program that is focused very much on addressing both climate change and affordability. It is something that my honourable colleague across the way would not understand because they simply don't have a plan to address climate change at all.
there is some truth to that. The Conservatives don't have a great
this government's recent announcement is a comedy in the
climate
making.
change plan.
The Liberals said that they could not deviate from their carbon tax plan. They said that extreme weather, hurricanes, floods, and fires demanded that they quadruple the carbon tax. They challenged anybody. They said anybody who challenged it was a Luddite. They said people get more in rebates than they pay, except last week they said when they pause the tax, it's actually making life more affordable. Canadians are realizing this Prime Minister's not worth the cost. So why won't they just cut the tax on all forms of home heating for everybody this winter?
You can't cut some forms for some provinces and not all forms for... It's not fair to do it like that.
I would like to remind this House that before we came into power in 2015, emissions projection by 2030 were going to be 80 million tons above our 2005 levels. We've now brought this down to 50 million tons below our 2005 levels. That's the equivalent of removing from our roads 20 million gas-powered vehicles, Mr. Speaker. We have the best record in the G7 for reducing greenhouse gas emissions over the last few years, and we will continue to work for Canadians to fight climate change and to help with affordability.
L'honorable député de Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, as inflation continues to remain, Canadians are realizing the Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and the Bank of Canada is concerned that the soft landing that it once projected is now much narrower. That's because economic uncertainty is increasing while inflation still hasn't been tamed. Two things the government could do to help the Bank of Canada tame in inflation is cancel the carbon tax and reduce its spending. So why is the government not taking these two very simple ways to make the Bank of Canada's job harder to bring inflation down for Canadians?
We're being hit from so many directions.
Mr. Speaker, it's wonderful to hear the Conservatives quoting the Governor of the Bank of Canada, someone that they wanted to fire a few months ago. But it's surprising and it's wonderful because if we actually listen to what the Governor of the Bank of Canada said, he said that carbon pricing was contributing 0.15% to inflation and that cutting carbon tax would have no long-term effect on inflation and no effect past that 1 year. So if the Conservatives are serious about helping Canadians, let's get supportive of what this government is doing to increase affordability and stop peddling whatever it is that they're trying to peddle.
Tlaib is a pretty good speaker. Look at it. Greg is up there. It's not even loud.
I'm sure that everyone would love to hear the question from the Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. You have the floor.
Luke, Berthold.
Last week, the Liberal Prime Minister looked at the polls and panicked. After 8 years, he realised that the common-sense Conservatives were right to say that the carbon tax was creating inflation and increasing the cost of absolutely everything. Once again, the Liberal Prime Minister has completely forgotten Quebecers who are also racked by the stress of not being able to feed their families. We know that the Bloc Québécois wants to radically increase the carbon tax, but that's certainly not what Quebecers chose. It's expensive to vote for the Bloc. Does the Prime Minister understand that he's simply not worth the cost?
Okay, Luke usually
the Honourable
heats
Minister.
up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what surprises a lot of people in this House and those who are watching us at home is that a party that wants to be government has absolutely no plan to fight climate change, no plan to adapt. Yesterday in La Presse, we heard that floods in Quebec this summer cost our farmers and producers $150 million. That's a direct impact of climate change. The Conservatives want to make polluting free. They want to make the climate crisis even worse, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Do you know what's even more shocking, Mr. Speaker, is that after 8 years, every month, 1 in 10 Quebecers used food banks in 2023. After 8 years of this Liberal regime, the Bloc wants to continue to punish the middle class by radically increasing the inflationary carbon tax, and the Liberals are picking and choosing who will see their bill reduced according to the colour they voted for. This is unacceptable, divisive and unfair to Quebec families. Will the Prime Minister finally understand that he is not worth the cost and announce the complete and permanent withdrawal of the second carbon tax, which will punish Quebecers?
It does seem to be dividing the country, like provinces are asking each other, why don't we get this, or why do you have to pay that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what is shocking is that there are at least 4 members of the Quebec Conservatives who in the past voted for carbon pricing. And today, the weather vane has shifted because the wind of the leader has changed to be against climate change. And so they want to do nothing to help Canadians fight against the impact of climate change and to reduce our pollution, Mr. Speaker.
It just doesn't seem like a good plan. It seems like
The Honourable Member for
it
Saint-Jean.
costs too much.
Mr. Speaker, in the Toronto Star, we read that Ottawa will establish its
She always
immigration
wears such
levels
casual
based
clothes.
on provinces' intake capacity with healthcare, housing and infrastructure. So they have to consult Quebec before announcing new immigration thresholds. But on the 4th of October, Christine Fréchette, Quebec Immigration Minister, said that the federal government had ignored Quebec's intake capacity, so Quebec had not been consulted. Can the minister publish documentations saying that Quebec has actually been consulted? The Honourable Minister for Immigration. Once again, the Bloc Québécois refuses to understand. The Quebec-Canada agreement has existed since 1991, so it's as old as the Bloc Québécois. But mysteriously, they forget how it works. Quebec has its word to say, Canada has its word to say. We are in constant communication with Quebec and other provinces. We set our thresholds, we respect our jurisdictions, but the Bloc Québécois seems to forget and ignore what the issue is. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, consultation is a thing that happens with two people. Tomorrow, there will be new thresholds announced by the government. In the media, they said that they would take into account intake capacity for healthcare, education, infrastructure. They also said that they would vote for the Bloc Québécois motion that adds education and francization as two factors to be taken into account. As far as we know, they don't know Quebec's intake capacity. Will they delay and finally consult Quebec and provinces? The Honourable Minister for Immigration.
He is kind of funny looking, Mark Miller, right?
When we evaluate various pillars and thresholds, Quebec's intake capacity and Canada's intake capacity are taken into account. Consultation doesn't happen between two people, it happens between 13 people. We need to talk about this with the country as a whole. We need to understand immigration. We must understand that it's the future of our country. So I invite the Bloc to see what we will propose. Quebec knows it already. They've been consulted, and they've been consulted constantly.
Canada does do a lot of immigration. A lot of people do move here. It must be that way in your community.
Tomorrow,
there's a difference,
he intends to do two contradictory things. On the one hand, he announced that he would vote in favour of our motion asking him to consult Quebec before adjusting his immigration thresholds according to our capacity to receive immigrants. And then there's a contradiction. He is going to announce immigration thresholds for 2026 without having consulted Quebec at all and without having the slightest idea of our intake capacity with regards to healthcare, education, francization and infrastructure. He will vote for one thing, then vote for the opposite the very same day. Why not consult Quebec before announcing thresholds? The Honourable Minister. I'll repeat this once again because I don't think
Ronald
the
McDonald
are
on
listening.
the floor.
One, consultations are underway. Two, people, they're very frustrated because we're voting for their motion.
Very short and sweet answer right there.
Lambton, Kent.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, a desperate Prime Minister is in total free fall, and he has admitted that his carbon tax is punishing Canadians. The Prime Minister has announced his re-election platform. Vote Liberals to increase the carbon tax on your home heating, gas, and groceries. Even the Minister from Long Range Mountains admitted that the exemption wasn't given to all Canadians because they didn't vote Liberal. What about the Liberal MPs from London? Why are Liberals so incompetent and so ineffective at getting an exemption on home heating for folks who are struggling in Ontario?
When they're doing those stairs, who do you think they're giving the dirty look to? the minister that they're trying to talk
Thank you very
to?
much. I thank my honourable colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, this government has always taken a regional approach, whether it's to economic development, whether it's to our climate plan. And Mr. Speaker, let's just be very clear, whether it's billions of dollars in St. Thomas, Ontario, for Volkswagen to set up and have batteries and be able to support the supply chain for Canada, Mr. Speaker, price on pollution is a market mechanism that is the best market mechanism we have. It's producing results unlike anything the Conservatives could actually put on the table. It's putting more money in the pockets of the middle class, Mr. Speaker, and it's reducing emissions.
He has trouble speaking without a hand in his pocket.
The honourable member from Lambton, Kent.
Mr. Speaker, this government is living in a fantasy land. The Liberals have finally said the quiet part out loud
She's
and
laughing.
have admitted that all Canadians are not equal to them. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling to pay their bills. The gimmicks that the government is offering is not going to help families who are stressing over how they're going to afford to heat their homes this winter. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will the Liberals listen to the Leader of the Opposition and introduce legislation today to axe the tax on all forms of home heating for all Canadians?
That's what we want, right?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard words like gimmicky and various kinds of things coming from the other side of the House. I would tell you that the person who actually has heating oil in their home will save upwards of $2,500 per year. It is an enormously important affordability measure. We are going to ensure that we are addressing affordability while we are concurrently fighting climate change. It is a shame in this House that we still have a political party in this country that does not believe in the reality of climate change. It doesn't exist in any other G7 country around the world. It's appalling, and Canadians should be shocked at that.
He threw a lot of stones in that one. He was shooting a lot of rockets.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Liberal Prime Minister gave Atlantic provinces a gift by reducing the carbon tax temporarily. But Quebecers and the rest of Canada must continue to pay for it. I read that some families have had to cut back on their spending recently just to get by, while still they're having to change their habits just to survive. Today, on Halloween, Bloc Québécois MPs have dressed up as Liberals and are dipping into Quebecers' wallets. Will this time-worn government extend its plans to Quebecers and the rest of Canada and stop dividing our country?
Look at Greg. He can't help himself. He's out of control.
Minister, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's rather ironic to hear this member speaking up against the carbon tax because he worked for a government, the Jean Charest government at the time, who was seen as a champion in North America in the fight against climate change. Arnold Schwarzenegger said that Jean Charest was the best premier of a province or state when it comes to fighting climate change, and the honourable member was part of that government. He voted for that measure, and now the weather vane has shifted just because there's a leader who is against fighting climate change. I find that unacceptable, Mr. Speaker.
It seems quiet to me.
All members want to hear the question and the answer.
What the hell?
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier.
Can't go on like that.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know what they think of this minister. It's more costly for Quebecers to have voted for the Bloc because they want to add a second tax to the tax so that Quebecers pay even more. They've stated loud and clear here in the House that the government should increase yet again, more drastically, the carbon tax. Will the government hear reason and be more reasonable than the Bloc and extend the reduction of the carbon tax to Quebecers and all Canadians? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, what's going on here? We got Scheer is by the Speaker's chair. What is going on?
Colleagues?
What is going on? This can't keep up like this, I don't think.
The Honourable Minister.
Interrupts for 10 minutes a session.
What's drastic, Mr. Speaker, is that my colleague from Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier came with me to Baie Saint Paul in July to observe the how the public there was affected by climate change. And so Their official policy still in 2023 for the Conservatives is that climate change does not exist. And yet we have a policy that is their policy is pro-pollution and doesn't help Canadians.
You can't get stiffer than Jean-Yves.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
I asked the Minister of Immigration if he would expedite existing immigration applications to help get families out of Gaza. He said he had instructed his officials to be as flexible as possible. Yet Global Affairs is outright telling people only immediate family members are eligible, parents and siblings are excluded. Clearly, the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. Will the Minister of Immigration officially commit to expediting existing immigration applications and include extended family members?
I don't find the NDP MPs have a leg to stand on, really.
What is happening in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic.
Holy moly, Melanie Jolie.
It is one of the worst places to live on earth right now. Now, we've been clear. 400 Canadians are stuck in Gaza right now, and they need to leave. Time is running out. We'll be putting pressure on all parties, Israel, making sure that we do so, working also with Egypt, working with Qatar, who's speaking to Hamas, and making sure that our Canadians are coming back home and brought to safety. Thank you.
Great job.
Got to get them out of there, though.
From Hamilton Centre.
This Liberal government is all talk and no action when it comes to protecting the rights of workers. In the past, they've used back-to-work legislation to force workers off of the picket line, and now they're dragging their feet on introducing our NDP anti-scab legislation. Meanwhile, the Canadian Olympic Committee has just hired a company that has locked out their employees, and Canada Post has just produced a non-union commercial with a union-busting company. So, trick or treat, Mr. Speaker, will the minister finally do the right thing for workers and commit to bringing in our NDP anti-scab legislation today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we're making sure that collective bargaining process is as free and fair as it can be. We've wrapped up consultations. We're going to take feedback that we receive from unions, employers, and Indigenous groups to inform legislation which will be tabled by the end of this year. This is the latest evolution in policy to protect the collective bargaining process. We need to strike a balance between doing it quickly and getting it right. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker,
She's got a mic issue.
Student program. In Brampton, I know many of them have come to my constituency office and asked for help. They become victim of fraud. Unscrupulous consultants have taken advantage of them. Mr. Speaker, this is not right. We have to protect the integrity of our program. What are we doing to combat fraud and protect the victims?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member of Brampton South for questioning our advocacy.
Ronald McDonald.
Our goal really in this announcement that we made on Friday is to punish bad actors without punishing the good actors that are having a welcome home for international students in this country. These people are a real credit to our country, and we want to make sure that we are properly accompanying to them. What we announced on Friday is making sure that we are verifying that the letters that are issued by designated learning institutes are properly verified so that we nip fraud in the butt, but also making sure that we're moving towards a recognized institution model to make sure that we are really ensuring that those institutions are actually doing their jobs and making sure that student experience is comprehensive. Thank you.
Man, he almost lost consciousness there.
Honourable Member from Coastal Bay Central and Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, after 8
Clifford
years,
Small.
this NDP Liberal Prime Minister finds himself rapidly falling out of favour with Atlantic Canadians. They're not stunned. They know he's not worth the cost. With a short 3-year reprieve from Carbon Tax 1, Carbon Tax 2 is still cleverly buried in oil bills. Why is this government misleading Atlantic Canadians about removing carbon tax when Carbon Tax 2 remains? And how much will they pay if they vote Liberal again?
Clifford usually goes for it.
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, as I've
Jonathan
said a number
Wilkes
of
is
times in this
cool.
House,
Rolls
the
off.
focus is on addressing affordability challenges, particularly as they relate to heating oil. Heating oil is by far the most expensive way to heat your home. The investment in heat pumps will actually save people significant amounts of money, but it will do so in a manner that will continue the battle against climate change, a battle that is an existential threat to the future of the human race, is an existential threat to the future of our children. It is a shame that the political party offside over there has no plan nor any belief in the reality of climate change.
Seems like one of the more experienced politicians.
Looking across at the member from Avalon, I can tell by the look on his face that that answer is just not good enough. Those that heat their homes with oil think they received a treat. But if they vote Liberal again, they're going to find out that it's a trick. As an Atlantic Canadian, I ask, will the Prime Minister stop dividing the country and remove all carbon tax from all forms of heating fuel for all Canadians and give them a goodie this Halloween?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government adopts thoughtful approaches to public policy. We are addressing affordability concerns in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change. But the honourable member, I am amazed, is somebody who actually is opposing one of the greatest economic opportunities of our time in Newfoundland and Labrador, supported by the province, developed by the province, developed by companies in Newfoundland and Labrador to ensure that they develop an offshore wind industry and a hydrogen industry that's going to create jobs and economic opportunity in his riding and in ridings throughout the province.
He got fired up a little bit that time. He doesn't do that very often.
The Honourable Member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Speaker, last Thursday the Prime Minister admitted two things. One, that his carbon tax is making life unaffordable for Atlantic Canadians. That's right. Two, that if re-elected, he will impose the full quadrupled carbon tax on Atlantic Canadians, regardless if they can afford it or not. After 8 years, Atlantic Canadians can't trust or afford these Liberals, and the Prime Minister's not worth the cost. When will this Prime Minister quit playing games, axe the carbon tax permanently so that every Canadian can keep the heat on?
Good question.
Get some likes out there, guys. Every time Greg interrupts, we'll do a like.
In this House, one thing is clear. What is clear is the Conservative Party actually has no belief in the reality of climate change and no plan to fight it. This government actually is focused on ensuring we are addressing affordability challenges in a thoughtful way while concurrently addressing the climate issue. It is a shame in this House, it is a shame in this country that we have a political party that denies the reality of climate change and is willing to give up the future of our children.
Good for you, Jonathan. He doesn't go off very often. He doesn't do that. Greg's back up, doing his thing like a zombie.
The Honourable Member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, our desperate Prime Minister, while in total freefall, is now trying to fool Atlantic Canadians by pushing the quadrupling of the carbon tax till just after the next election. It's clear now more than ever that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost, and after 8 years, everything is more expensive. The government should listen to Premier Higgs of New Brunswick when he told them that they should just cancel their unaffordable carbon tax altogether. Will this NDP Liberal government finally listen, get off the backs of Canadians and axe a tax for all Canadians from
Holy
sea to sea?
cow! Holy moly! The guy's got to take his blood pressure medication.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and through you, I would certainly suggest to my honourable colleague that perhaps he talk to his constituents about the $2,500 a year that they will save through the installation of a heat pump, that they are going to be able to do that in a manner that will enhance the affordability for their family, but also do so in a manner where they can assist in the fight against climate change. As I said before, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives in other G7 countries around the world marvel at the fact that in Canada we still have a political party that questions the reality of climate change and has no plan to fight it.
He took his vitamins this morning.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, small businesses are not asking the federal government for much. They just want it to be flexible by pushing back the reimbursement of the CEBA debt without losing their grants. Mr. Speaker, we're not talking about multinationals here. It's where your daughter works at the corner restaurant, or it's business people at home in our ridings who are working hard to create employment in their region. It could be a future Bombardier. The government is patient and generous with American multinationals, so why is it not being flexible with our small businesses?
Worried about the small businesses in Quebec.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government listens
I used to own a small
business.
She'll say, yeah.
And the qualification for the exemption was in 2022. The small businesses asked for our help, and that is why our government extended the deadline of eligibility until January 18th, 2024. We have also announced an extension, a full extension of this date until the end of 2026. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, it's a double standard here in Ottawa with regard to the needs of big oil and those of small business. Neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives are challenging the $83 billion in subsidies to the oil patch over the past two budgets. According to them, that's responsible. But giving an extra year to the local small businesses to pay down their pandemic debts, for them, that's just too much. Mr. Speaker, when will this government get its priorities straight and postpone the payment of CEBA? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to correct what my colleague just said, because Canada is the first G7 country to have eliminated subsidies on fossil fuels 2 years sooner than our 2025 deadline. And we went even further because we also eliminated public support for fossil fuels, and no other G20 country has done that. We're the first.
I don't know. Elimination's not the right word there.
The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
The carbon tax has made life unaffordable for Canadians, proving what we already knew. After 8 years, Canadians know this desperate NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. On top of this, a member of this Liberal cabinet let the veil slip and admitted that people living in Eastern Ontario were denied an exemption on heating oil because they voted the wrong way. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if my neighbour, the member from Kingston the Islands, shares the sentiment and can explain why the Liberals are refusing to cut the tax on all forms of home heating to all Canadians.
That's a good question. I know it's been asked a few times, but it is what we want, right? There can't be many Canadians that are happy about paying
it. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a recent study by the Public Policy Forum, offshore wind could be for Atlantic Canada what oil was to Texas or hydropower to Quebec. This is monumental, as the study quotes. The region could supply 6.5 million average homes, so twice the electricity currently consumed in Atlantic Canada. I guess many Canadians are wondering why are Conservatives standing in the way of clean energy power that would benefit all Atlantic Canadians and Canadians across the country, Mr. Speaker.
I would like to see more wind power in Atlantic Canada. Might as well take advantage of what the oceans do, which is generate a lot of wind. And look at what Quebec did with hydro. We could do that.
8 long years, a desperate Prime Minister in freefall has finally admitted his NDP Liberal carbon tax punishes some Canadians more than others. The Prime Minister set his election platform recently. He said, if you vote Liberal, you'll increase taxes on gas, groceries, and home heating after the next election. Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. In Saskatchewan, it gets pretty cold outside. We use 90% natural gas to heat our homes. It's greener and cleaner, but we don't get the exemption. Will this NDP Liberal government finally listen to our leader and axe a tax for all Canadians?
They're going hard on the axe the tax today. Like, all they're focused on is reducing it or removing it for all Canadians.
My honourable colleague to do a little bit more reading. Home heating oil is 2 to 3 times as expensive as natural gas. It is imperative that we actually enable people to implement heat pumps to be more affordable, to ensure that they actually can save the $2,500 a year and do so in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have programs to encourage the displacement of natural gas-fired furnaces through the Greener Homes program, through the Greener Loans program, and to see the implementation of heat pumps. And certainly folks in Saskatchewan, where I grew up, are very, very, very much able to access those programs.
Greg is too much. Do you agree that Greg is too much? Like and subscribe if you think Greg is too much.
Speaker, with this
Interrupts
government
all the time.
freefall, the Prime Minister dropped his tax on home heating, but only for certain voters. After 8 years, all Canadians are feeling the pain and know that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. His minister then admitted this exemption wasn't granted to all Canadians because they don't vote Liberal. What about the Liberal member from Calgary Skyview or the minister from Edmonton Centre? Just 1 year ago, these Alberta MPs voted to keep the tax on home heating. Is the Prime Minister ignoring his Alberta colleagues, or do they agree that Albertans should be taxed more for heating their homes than other Canadians?
He's a little stiff, but he's well-spoken.
The Honourable Minister.
Watch, he'll put his hand in his pocket. There he goes.
Calgary for his question. We have always worked to respond to regional needs as a government. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We put billions of dollars in the last budget for carbon capture, use and storage that predominantly will go to Alberta and Saskatchewan. We have put flexibility in our clean electricity regulations, an exemption, Mr. Speaker, that will take us out to 2035 burning natural gas. Mr. Speaker, if the Premier of Alberta and the Premier of Saskatchewan want to scope this in, they can join us and help low-income Canadians to get heat pumps and get off of heating oil.
The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, my riding of Laval-les-Îles has the largest Armenian community here in Canada. Many of my fellow citizens are very concerned by the humanitarian crisis, further to recent military
They do such a
activity on
bad
the
job
part
at
of
these
Azerbaijan.
kiosks.
How will the new Canadian embassy in Yerevan, opened by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, contribute to improving relations between Canada and Armenia, as well as resolving the conflict in the long term? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his important question. Yes, I have just come back from Armenia, where we opened for the first time a Canadian embassy in Armenia. And I think, yes, it's good news for everyone. And I'd like to say that we have also, I joined the EU mission that monitors the border to ensure greater safety and stability in South Caucasus. The leadership on the part of Canada is how we do diplomacy, and I will talk about this tomorrow in Montreal.
I did watch a speech that she delivered yesterday.
The Honourable Member
She is quite well spoken.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are hurting more than ever before. And this government's solution is actually to divide our country by picking winners and losers. For some Canadians, they'll save $1 on the carbon tax with regards to their home heating because, of course, it'll be temporarily paused. But for those in Alberta, they're not given the same benefit. They'll continue to pay the carbon tax. The Minister of Labour and Seniors had this to say. He said, "This is purely an affordability issue." Direct quote. Conservatives believe that that is true. It is an affordability issue for all Canadians, not just some. And so can the Minister for Labour and Seniors tell me why the seniors in my community don't deserve the same break as the seniors in his community?
Everybody deserves the same treatment. In this case, they do.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Let's look at the facts. Child poverty in this country cut in half thanks to the Canada Child Benefit, which the Conservatives, how did they vote, Mr. Speaker? They voted against. An affordable childcare system that is saving Alberta families up to $10,000 a year and creating 65,000 new spaces. How did the Conservatives campaign, Mr. Speaker? Against. Mr. Speaker, a pipeline to Tidewater. And what did the Conservatives do as we were getting TMX ready to be built? They argued against. Mr. Speaker, we're here for Canadians. We're here for Albertans. We're going to make sure that our climate plan works. They can argue against. We're here for Canadians every step of the way.
Randy was pretty good today, too. The Liberals have been good the last week and a half. They have been more entertaining. Except for Greg
Member for
Fergus, Speaker of the House.
Crowfoot.
Won't shut up.
After 8 years, this desperate NDP Liberal Prime Minister in total freefall finally admitted
Tony
his carbon
Robbins
tax is punishing Canadians and making life unaffordable. But today we heard from the Minister for Prairies and Northern Development that he's never heard pushback against his party's carbon tax. Well, I have news for that minister. Canadians from every corner of the country have been desperate for someone to listen to their plight. Will that minister admit that that Prime Minister is not worth the cost and join Conservatives in supporting our call to axe the carbon tax on all home heating?
Do you think he looks like Tony Robbins? I think he does. It's just like Tony Robbins.
The Honourable Minister.
Conservatives like to talk about axes, and it's clear that they've been working with the Premier of Alberta, because what does she want to do? She wants to axe renewables. She wants to axe low electricity rates in Alberta by doing a 6-month moratorium that's cost us already $12 billion in investment and $30 billion more, probably leaving our province. Mr. Speaker, they want to slash supports for students and seniors and working class Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And you know what the icing on the top of the cake is, Mr. Speaker? They want to pull Albertans out of the CPP. Shame on them. We're going to move forward on climate change and protect Albertan pensioners.
You could experience some motion sickness when Randy's up there.
Before we move on to the Honourable Member for questions, I'd like to remind all Honourable Members, please, to not intervene while the floor is being occupied by somebody else. I know I don't have a clear view of what happens in the latter half of the aisle, but I can hear the voices of certain members, perhaps, and I would just ask members to please try to listen to their whips so that we can hear the questions. Then I have
the Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska-Rivière, Zulu. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this government, Quebecers are fed up. Food bank use is at a record high, with 1 Quebecer out of 10 using them monthly.
It's terrible.
And this government, with the Bloc support, wants to worsen things with its carbon tax. It's not worth the cost to vote Bloc. The Prime Minister gave a break to the Atlantic provinces, but not to Quebecers. Will the Prime Minister announce the complete and not just temporary rollbacks of this second carbon tax on all Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Climate Change and the Environment. Given the enthusiasm of at the questions, I was not able to answer the member for Pont-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier what they thought of my work as the Environment Minister. The representative of Greenpeace said that I was the best Environment Minister in the history of the country.
Shining his own shoes right there. Look at Greg on his button. He's on his button. Look, you can see him doing it. Like, that's one of the things that you'll catch on to if you pay attention. You can see him in his chair and his hand gestures.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, the late Nelson Mandela once said, "Sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does." A great example of this are the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games. Earlier this month, Team Canada began its 2023 Pan Am journey, and in a few weeks from now, it will begin its Para-Pan Am journey. I think I can say with confidence, Mr. Speaker, that all members of this House are proud of our Canadian athletes. Can the Minister please update this House on our athletes at the Pan Am Para-Pan Am Games?
The Honourable Minister.
I'd like to thank my friend and colleague from Don Valley East for his question. I was recently in Chile to support Team Canada.
470 Canadian athletes are participating in these games, with another 127 slated to compete at the Pan Am Games in a couple of weeks. These include 3 athletes from my home riding of Delta. So far, Canada has won 105 medals and is on course to exceed its all-time medal count at these games. Thank you to all the athletes, thank you to the coaches, to the parents, to the trainers, to everyone who makes it possible for these athletes to compete and succeed. On behalf of all Canadians, I'd like to wish our athletes well and say, go Canada, go!
The honourable member for Nunavut.
The cost of living is creating a crisis in northern communities, and the Liberals are making it worse. Federal employees rely on the subsidy to help them with their housing expenses, and the Liberals are trying to cut that subsidy, a move that will cost workers between $6,000 and $8,500 a year. This will force people out of their homes and cut services that Northerners rely on. Will the Liberals reverse this decision and stop punishing workers?
I like her earrings. Different.
The honourable minister.
Thank you. Thank the honourable member for that important question, and it's an important question. It's one that we're fully engaged in. I know I'm working with the Treasury Board. I'm working with the MPs from Nunavut, the MPs from Northwest Territories and Yukon on the question, and as soon as we get clarification, I will get back to the MP from Nunavut with the answer.
Under the influence. Does he not? Does he seem dopey?
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Speaker, it's no secret that Canada's in a housing crisis. We've heard from builders, bankers, economists, policy experts that significant public investment in housing is required in order to get out of this crisis. What does the finance minister say? What about what the Bank of Canada will do? What about the rating agencies? Well, good news. At the Finance Committee yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of Canada said that investments to increase housing supply in Canada would not be regarded as inflationary spending and might actually help bring down inflation. So the path is clear to replenish the co-investment fund, the Rapid Housing Initiative, and start a nonprofit acquisition fund. Is the government going to do it in the fall economic statement, or will they be missing in action?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
I thank the colleague for the question, Mr. Speaker. The point on the acquisition fund is one that he and I have discussed in the past, and it does merit further consideration. But I also point to the various other programs, the other programs that are part of the National Housing Strategy that he mentions, the Rapid Housing Initiative, the National Co-Investment Fund. These programs combined, added to others, have lifted 70,000 people off the streets. They now have wraparound supports that help them make a transition towards something better. 122,000 people, Mr. Speaker, who are near homelessness are now housed because of this strategy. We have more work to do. We will do that work in cooperation with partners.
I hope so.
That brings us to an end of question period.
All right, guys.
I see that there are 2 points of orders.
Well,
the first of which with the member for...
We're done with that for today. It was fun, though. Poilievre and Trudeau really did go off at the beginning there. It's coming apart in the House. It would seem that the Conservatives and the Liberals really are at each other's throats, because the Liberals are firing back. So that's interesting. Anyhow, guys, we're out for this evening. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be posting this later on too. We've got other videos you could check out. So like and subscribe. We'll be back. Question Period Canada every day.